board, and I'll try to load that thing up. If you could, we'll have to break it up into smaller segments, so maybe one video is going to be leukemias, and then the next video will be lymphomas or something like that, because if you get them too big on there, it literally will take me all day to upload this thing, if it upholds it all. All right, so anyway, we're going to talk about fever and chills on this specific topic. So notice, though, it is going to have leukemias in there. We'll go over your basic leukemias, and then the next part will be going over lymphomas. Rheumatic fever, we already talked about, infections of the heart. We already kind of talked about those, so we'll just kind of remind you about those real fast. Pleurisy, empyema, I think, that's how you say that. And we'll, again, touch on that very briefly, kind of like we did when we were talking about what am I thinking? What am I thinking? I'm blanking this in my head here. When we were talking about pericarditis, that's it. You know, that sac over your heart? Anyway, it's about as important as that, you know, where we just kind of touch on it and move on. HIV, obviously you can't really go through a patho course without talking about HIV a little bit. We'll just kind of touch on that and then move on. Sepsis, we got a little bit about syphilis. We'll see that again towards the end of the semester. But syphilis is one of those unique sexually transmitted infections that has a lot more to it. So we catch it a few times through the semester. And toxic shock syndrome, which we haven't actually talked about yet, have we? But we'll look at it, okay? And you will see that some of these things for the rest of the semester, some of the things that we talk about, we kind of touch on them again a little bit later and kind of remind you. It kind of helps prepare you for that final cumulative exam. Anyway, so let's start with leukemia. Okay, the main thing about leukemia that we have to know is how to classify it, because it makes everything more sense. Makes it make more sense once you do this. So let me first go to this. Okay, this is kind of important that you understand the way you make blood products. And I know you've had this in prior classes, but just let me review real fast. Okay, so if you have a blood stem cell. That means that that blood stem cell can turn into any blood product. It obviously can't turn into something that's not like a neural tissue or something, but it can turn into any blood product, okay? It'll either go down one side. We call that, by the way, differentiation. So it would differentiate, either go down one side or the other side. So either down the lymph side or the myeloid side, okay? When we say it differentiates, it means it got more specific. So the stem cell no longer is a pure blood stem cell. It is a either myeloid stem cell or a lymphoid stem cell. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, depending on which way you went, then we talk about what happens over there. So let's pick lymph because that's a little more simple, okay? So if that blood stem cell went down the lymph side, then that lymph stem cell will make a lymphoblast. What do we know about anything that ends in blast on a cell? Blasts build, right? Remember that from your whole osteo thing way back in the day? Mm-hmm. Blast build, this is the same thing here, as in the lymphoblast is kind of like a little stem cell, right? I mean, it's very well differentiated, meaning it's a lot more specific. It can only do lymph stuff or white blood cells and build those. But it's either going to build your B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, or natural killer cells. That's the only options from a lymphoblast, okay? One thing I do want to point out, though, is that these blast cells, whether it's a lymphoblast or a myeloblast, these blast cells, they're kind of big, okay? And they look like white blood cells to a lot of people under a microscope, okay? So that becomes important in a second here when we start talking about leukemias, okay? That they are big, they kind of look like white blood cells. All right, even though they're kind of worthless at this point. Their only point of a blast cell, the lympho or myeloblast cell, is to make the blood products that they're going to make, right? So them by themselves don't do a ton of use, okay? So if you go down the myeloid side, of course, you can see that you have a myeloblast, and that's going to make, your granulocytes, your Ben, your basophil, neutrophil, eosinophil, okay? Or it's going to make the other stuff, like red blood cells and platelets, okay? So let me go back to this about how we classify leukemias, okay? That's pretty simple. Again, this is the beginner version. You'll see where you can get a lot more detail on this if you go into it, but we're not going that deep at this undergrad level. So you either have an acute leukemia or you have a chronic leukemia, okay? Obviously acute, it's happening right now, it's happening fast, it's happening so that you feel those symptoms pretty fast and pretty abruptly, right? They tend to be rapidly progressing, and you know that you have something pretty bad, okay? The chronic part, of course, like any chronic disease, is over a long period of time. The difference with leukemias is the chronic part of it just kind of sneaks up on you, and it can get really bad before you even notice it sometimes. On the other hand, it's chronic and it kind of sneaks up on you, which means if you accidentally discover it when it's early, it has a pretty good cure rate, okay? So, acute or chronic, and it's just either the lymph side or myeloside, one of those two. Okay, so again, back to that blood thing. It's either acute or chronic, and it's either the lymph side that's messed up or the myeloside that's messed up. Cool? Okay, so we'll look at each one of these and find out a little more about it, but if you have this in mind, you can predict the signs and symptoms of these things based on just understanding the basic, this is how blood is made, right? Okay, so before you go too far into that, let's go to acute leukemias and talk about what happens with that. Okay, so again, not necessarily myeloid or lymphoid leukemias, but just acute. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out is this says right here, the accumulation of blast cells, right? And we were talking about the blast cells, so what I was going to point out is these leukemias, basically this, the myelo or the lymphoblast cells, that's pretty much what's being messed up. Okay, so when we're talking about leukemia, we are talking about a cancer, right? Obviously blood cancer. And the blast cells are usually what's rapidly uncontrolled division, okay? When you're talking about leukemia, does that make sense? So, like I said before, I didn't necessarily point this part out, but notice it's called lymphocytic leukemia, myelogenous. It is totally fine, and you'll see that where somebody might refer to it instead of lymphocytic, they might refer to it as lymphoblastic or myeloblastic, okay? Just because we're talking about the blast cells. Does that make sense? Okay, so they use those words interchangeably. It's not really a different kind of anything. It's just it's a blast cell. And sometimes they use cytic or blastic or genus or creation of genesis, right? Yeah.
Do you want me to just do one section and then stop it and then do the next section?
The videos?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you can stop it, yeah.
After
every
leukemia?
10 minutes or something like that, or maybe even after leukemia, which is going to take a lot more than 10 minutes. But just, yeah, try to keep them where it's, I don't know, that would be probably a good place to stop it and then start a brand new one. Because now we're specifically talking about acute leukemias, and then we'll talk about